Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Tell me your name, the project you're affiliated with.
Of course. So my name is Chris Ebell. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Arcades Digital, which is a company located in Geneva, Switzerland, and we make high-quality crypto assets.
At Coin Agenda, you spoke about a very technical but important subject, which is the need to move beyond current cryptographic algorithms. Why do we have that need?
Well, look, the problem is that in a couple of years from now, and I mean there are different estimates of when that will be, it will be possible to breach standard encryption methods with quantum technology, with quantum computing. And when that happens, there is going to be kind of a shockwave to the system because a lot of what we have encrypted today will be readable then. And the reason I'm talking about it today is that when we make crypto assets for the future, and we look at those assets to be stable and in good condition in 20, 30, 40 years from now, I know it's a crazy time span for an industry that talks in, your OG when you're like 8 years ago. But it's absolutely crucial when you think about collateralization and really bringing assets into the real financial markets, then you have to think about those kinds of things.
So there are two areas, and we will maybe touch on both of them. What you started with is the stability of crypto assets. Right. Because if I am able to break crypto encryption, what is it that I am theoretically able to do with those crypto assets that are broken at that point?
Yeah, well, you would be able to access metadata, for instance. You would be able to access the actual, in the case of a digital asset, the actual digital asset itself. You might be able to alter transactions. You might be able to attack on several levels. The blockchain itself, the smart contracts that make those assets. So there's a multitude of attack vectors actually, and that would then compromise the actual.
Would
asset.
I be able, just to go to the core
Sure.
and the most blasphemous of all, would I be able to routinely double spend Bitcoin, for example?
No, I think that would be not as easy. It's not as easy as it sounds. I mean, I think we have to be also careful when I say crypto assets will be compromised on a large scale. I mean, it's still a development, right? It's not like it's going to be happening like this. But the point I think I'm making is that it would be foolish not to take this into account at this point, and we have to scenario this out a little bit. It has a couple of consequences of how we do things. In that space. One of them is also to think about how can we upgrade existing assets. So it has those kinds of consequences. They're not just necessarily about cryptography itself, but also about how we manage the assets and how we think about the longevity of cryptographic assets.
Now, the problem is of a given size.
Yeah.
Just let's say, to make it simple, today crypto represents a $2 trillion market. Let's say that it is directly impacting half of it, so it is a $1 trillion problem today. However, isn't it the case that the traditional banking industry would be affected by the same challenge, and it is 100 times or 1,000 times larger problem that they find themselves with? Are they aware, and are they equally worried about this?
Yes, they are. They are aware and they're worried about it. It's not necessarily something that's on the front page of each bank where they say, hey, by the way, we might have a problem coming down the road. No, but they're working on this. And I think that's a part of they have more established risk management structures. In crypto, what I see a lot of times is that people get very enthusiastic about their technology. They build, which is fantastic. It's great. It gives us all the explosion in DeFi and in crypto. But it's time, I think, to really think about the longevity of those projects.
So how are we going to address the problem that this quantum weakness represents?
Well, I think the approach that we should take is a careful analysis of where the attack vectors will be in terms of the cryptography, but it's also something that represents a larger problem. It's not just that. It's also the legal part. It's the enforceability, let's say, of rights that are given through an NFT, for instance. How can we actually make this a legally sound product that will retain its value over a long period of time? So in a way, the cryptographic aspect is symptomatic or emblematic for what needs to happen.
Now, if quantum computers are representing the principal attack vector, at least in our conversation right now, would potentially quantum computers also represent a new layer of defense?
For sure, yes. I mean, I think that's clearly a technology that we should grow with, right? It's something that needs to be on the side of the technological development today. And I think that's kind of where, that's one of the, like when you talk about what should be done, I think it's a co-development of technology and a certain convergence, I suppose. And that really goes to layer one. It goes and to all the other layers as well. So we really have to see where does it make sense and what could be the providers. Right now, today, we can have quantum resistant encryption. I mean, symmetric key encryption is one of those that's available. It's there, and it's reasonably, if you make the key sizes big enough, it's reasonably quantum resistant. There is no 100% security, and one thing we always have to remember, just very quickly, is there's always a congruency between the size of the price and obviously the amount of work that people are willing to do in order to get that price. So there is a market, so to speak, for that too. So if there are other measures you can minimize that by let's say not having individual assets that are a billion. I mean, these are also just very sort of housekeeping type measures that you can take and bring down the risk already a little bit.
There are, however, some things that cannot be undone. So, for example, it is very unlikely that the Bitcoin blockchain will restart from zero. And it is also the case that there are organizations that are running such a net harvesting data, even though today they are unable to either decrypt it or analyze it at the depth they want. They know that in the future they are going to be able to do so. And is that something that we will ever be able to resolve? Because it is a past record that today we believe is opaque, and it will be transparent in the future.
No. I mean that's going to be a problem, and I think the answer to that is we should switch to better encryption today for even stuff that we're just using and transacting today. So
and so that means that it is not only a question of the storage and the governance and the legal protections around what we do, but it is also a profound rethinking of what are the base layer technologies that we use for communication, and quantum technologies can help in that as well.
Correct.
Just like there are quantum computing infrastructure that is being developed, there is also quantum communication technology that is being developed.
Absolutely, and it goes into the same direction, right? I mean, it's always the weakest link. That's the problem, right? So you have to actually do if you talk about end-to-end encryption when you're using WhatsApp or Telegram, that's great. But what about your device? What about the backup server? And for that, we also need to create solutions. And when you talk about privacy, when you talk about financial information, wealth management, health data, and so on. These are all areas that you want to protect, right? And one of the ways to do it is to really kind of encapsulate this into protected cells, so to speak.
So there is an interesting double trend in quantum computing. On one hand, there are providers like D-Wave, for example, that will sell you a very specialized machine.
And annealer, yes.
And all the three-letter agencies must buy one in order to be able to experiment with them. Also, there are IBM and Google and Microsoft, as well as Chinese initiatives that with different architectures are trying to develop universal quantum computing approaches.
Yeah.
So this is one. The other approach is actually often software only, where algorithms at increasing levels of abstraction are made available, and then people can run those algorithms either on quantum computers proper or quantum simulators.
Right, correct.
And these approaches are typically open source.
Yes.
Both IBM as well as Cambridge Quantum Technologies made available all of their software in open source in order to attract as many people as possible. What is your expectation? Is a more proprietary approach or is a more open approach that is going to be winning in the future?
Honestly, I think it's going to be the open approach. I think that's the way to go, just because of the trust factor. I think black box approaches might be useful for certain use cases for sure, and I'm sure they're also being developed. But when you talk about large-scale infrastructure, when you talk about the foundational technology for the economy, you're going to want to have a certain amount of visibility on those algorithms, and I would strongly be in favor of that.
Now, in terms of timeline, you already said that you believe the first serious attacks and vulnerabilities may become visible, and it will be a big breaking point in a couple of years or so. When is it going to be more widely, rather than single point attacks against very large valuable prizes? When is it that is going to be something that everyone should be concerned about, as well as the solutions becoming available broadly?
I think it's a little bit like any of those technological situations where you have the possibility of something happening being just very disruptive. And even before that event actually happens, if it even completely happens as we expect, it just builds that threat scenario. And I think what's happening here is a certain amount of psychology in the system, right? So the expectation of the technological change is going to put pressure on the system way before this actually is going to be a real possibility in a widespread kind of way. And even if we're there, it may not happen in the same, we imagine it as sort of this, like today it's not possible, and like in a week it's possible, from next Tuesday onwards, your encryption is gone. That's not how it's going to happen. But it's going to gradually build up to that, and I think there are different predictions of when this becomes relevant, right? So like you say, is it possible as a demonstrator or like a big scale attack? But you can imagine that the first time something like that happens, and even if it's not if it's $50 million gets stolen or something like that, it will suddenly come to people's attention, and they'll be like, okay, this is an issue now, and then there will be a scramble. So I think the ones who start preparing now for this, at least getting their ducks in a row for this, I think that's the message.
And I think that is a very good last question. If someone maybe watching this video says, okay, I have to start preparing, what should they do?
Well, they should do an analysis of where their vulnerabilities are, and typically you would want to talk to someone who understands how this works and where those vectors could be, and then start formulating a risk mitigation strategy. I think that would be the way to do this, the responsible way.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for this conversation.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.